everyone. So maybe Venkat, why don't you introduce also yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Venkatakrishnan. You can just call me Venkat. My name is, really long and, might be hard to pronounce. I am the Director of Research at the Discovery Partners Institute, which is part of the University of Illinois system. I am also a professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago, Department of Computer Science. My broad interests are in security, privacy, and of computer systems in general. And in particular, I work on topics that where we look at vulnerability analysis of computing systems, how they are vulnerable to security, privacy attacks, and then also in actual online attack detection, how an enterprise network or a system that supports a community like a science gateway, how those kind of systems we could prevent them from online attacks and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to participate here.
Thank you. So Petra.
Hello, everyone. I am Petra ten Hopen. I am a scientific data manager at the UK Polar Data Centre at the British Antarctic Survey. And yeah, I am here because I would like to help to build a virtual research infrastructure for biodiversity data. So I was hoping to learn a little bit more from you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Soleil?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sulen. I'm calling in from Canada, and I work for the World Data System. I'm currently writing a landscape review on the interoperability of virtual research environments /VL/science gateways. So I'm really looking forward to this talk, especially the I component of FAIR, but overall, how to increase trust in VREs.
Thank you very much. And I know that I still owe you a long email. I have it on my list. Dawn?
Yes.
So a short introduction. So if you talk, we cannot hear you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
now, yes. So we don't hear an introduction.
Oh, I'm a developer, software developer with the NEON program.
Fantastic. Great. So yeah, we are a smaller group today, but I think we can have really fantastic discussions also. So we are talking today about is fairness sufficient to increase trust in VRE and foster critical thinking. And if you look at research computing, we have all these different lab instruments. And in the last decades, really a plethora of web-based agile frameworks got developed, and we have this huge distributed data and computing infrastructures. Also, the high-speed networks worldwide are really fast now, and we have research software. So the researchers themselves often deal with data and compute-intensive problems, and they have all these technologies around them. And they want to focus on their research topic, and it might be a little bit overwhelming. And so that is the need for science gateways, and to make it a happy researcher to help them to improve their research, and without getting into the nitty-gritty details of all the technologies which are helpful for doing their research. So if we look at this picture, it's a little bit like for people who haven't heard about science gateways or virtual research environment before, you might have heard about a research portal or a cyber infrastructure or a collaboratory or a virtual lab. So we understand in this group all this as synonyms. And it could be also something like platforms. So a new expression or term in Australia is really talking more about platforms and virtual labs. And when we talk about FAIR in this session, it's really about this findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Because I know there are also other FAIR expressions, of course, about fair trading. So we are really looking for these FAIR guiding principles for scientific data management and stewardship, and also for software and for virtual research environments. So if you look at the timeline of this interest group, so we started over 6 years ago in the 7th plenary with a BO5, whether it would be beneficial to have this interest group in RDA about virtual research environments. So it looks like, yes, it is beneficial, people are interested. So we started to look at interoperability across different systems because there are a lot of different mature systems. And the next topic, we looked also at sustainability across multiple infrastructures, because research infrastructures between the different continents are also different. Then how to really plan a roadmap for sustainable collaborative development, and how do people find them, and what skills do they need to build and use them. From that, we came from transforming data into information and knowledge. So that is also a role of virtual research environment, which is very important. We looked at novel concepts and technologies like sustainability and reproducibility, but also at reference models and a catalog of design patterns to work through that, and maybe have a common reference architectures for VREs, even so the implementations might be different. And then we looked at visions, because everything we will, or what communities want to use in 10 years, we already start or need to develop. And so, and then we looked also at good practices for communicating and collaborating effectively in distributed communities and initiatives. And we looked at requirements for the next generation of VREs. And today we are looking really at trust, security, and fairness of VREs. So it's an ongoing community effort, it's open-ended. What we want to do is, under this umbrella of the interest groups, that we have different working groups. So we are happy to build more, and the working groups in RDA have 18 months goals. And what we have now one working group, it's a FAIR for virtual research environments, which will take place also at this plenary. And the session for this working group will be next week on Tuesday and Wednesday, the breakout 7 and breakout 12. And that's really the first discussion, how to do the timeline and how is the path forward for analyzing FAIR and for virtual research environments. And I see there may be questions in the chat. Oh yes, so thank you very much. Yeah, there are shared notes. It would be fantastic. And this session is recorded, so I've seen more people have joined. These sessions are recorded, and we have notes. It would be great if you add your name there and your email address and affiliation. So if you look, for example, at trust and critical thinking, so there's this publication of a colleague of mine who looked at different communities, users of virtual research environment and science gateways. And really, so this, if you build it, they will come. That doesn't really work in this space, because the community has to be really addressed, and there has to be good interaction with the community. So if you build it, promote it, and they trust you, then they will come. So that is what was the result of this research, which makes a lot of sense. So if we think about trust and critical thinking, so there's this trust. People start to trust a technical solution if it is of high quality, if it's effective, if they feel like integrity that the solution is in, and there's resilience. So for example, if there's a virtual research environment and that is only half of the time available for users, they probably won't continue using it. And not because they fear that they don't get the correct results. They have more the problem that it's not usable in that way when they need it, or if it's effective. So let's say they start their simulations in a science gateway in a virtual research environment, and it goes in an endless loop, or it never, it's really, they don't get the result. Also, that is something where they lose the trust in a solution. And critical thinking is the other. So there shouldn't be blind trust. So critical thinking is still important. I think we all, or a lot of us, had maybe the situations with students or with other colleagues, something comes out of a portal and they say, oh, this, it's a result of the simulation, so I trust it. No, we still need to question also results, even if it's an established virtual research environment. And critical thinking is, on the one hand side, a gift, but it's also a skill that can be learned. So it's like learning to identify the situation or problem, to do, your research. And you can maybe identify biases to see, so the publication, for example, from which group is it? How is the journal where it's published? Maybe there is a bias. So there are different aspects you can really foster also critical thinking, and also be curious about solutions. And so these are only examples to foster critical thinking and to learn the skill. So this was the introduction, and I switch now with my, let me do that. So I have a Mentimeter. At the moment here is this in the way. I would like to go with you through. And if you go please to menti.com and you use the code, so maybe Kiran, you can put the code again in the
chat.
Great. So it would be great to know. So do you trust data and research if it's just openly shared? So let's say you read a publication and the data belonging to it is also openly shared, accessible, you can look at it. So is that something where you develop trust for this data? Okay, we have a yes. Or do you need, for example, more information on the data? Are you not sure about it? Everything is possible here. Okay, we have 2 yes. And you're welcome also to put comments, of course, in the chat, or raise your hand and if you want to talk. So we have 3 yes. So that is a really positive sign for sharing data. So, oh, 4, sorry. So everyone, that is fantastic. I really like that, because that shows if it's shared already and openly accessible, it improves, the trust and therefore also the reuse. Let me go into the next question. And of course, it doesn't want to go at the moment. Let me, okay. Do you test the simulation of a publication or compare your results with the published results? So if that's, for example, one of the situations you are in. So for example, when I'm reviewing a paper with computational results, and I can, and I have the means, for example, to test it again, like if it's an openly accessible science gateway, I would test it as a reviewer, but I would be, my answer would be it depends, because I would not do it for a normal publication I'm reading or I'm referring to or referencing. But if I'm one of the reviewers, yeah, I probably would test a couple of things to be able to give a review. Great. So it's no, or it depends, and I'm totally with you all there. If I read a publication and it's, as I said, only one of my references, I would not test it again. I would only test it if I want to reuse a tool, whether I can create the same results, whether I can, whether it works also for me. So which components of a virtual research environment should be fair to increase your trust in the result? So let's say it like this. Science Gateway's virtual research environment have different levels. There is a software framework itself. And then in the Science Gateway, because it's made for domain researchers, there might be extra data collection, there might be tool simulations, there might be workflows. So which components do you really would like to have, this experience, it's findable, it's accessible. And you can select several options. What would be important for you that should be fair? So to really that you can trust in a result. And I would select all the topics to really trust the result. From my point of view, I would like to have the software framework itself fair, the data, tools, workflows, but there's no, right or wrong answer at all here. In the whole exercise, it's really about, because trust is something personal, how important a couple of characteristics are for you. Okay, great. The data and the workflows on the tools, I totally agree. Data and workflows is very important, yeah. The software framework itself, I can see that it is less important. The tools might be something they're used also in the workflow, so that there's an overlap dependent on what happens there. Great. So here, this is a word cloud. So you can put in what you think. For example, why would you trust the publication result or simulation result, even so it seems off? So let's say you do something for your research, or you read something, or as a developer, you want to use a tool. So, and something seems to be off. So would you still trust it? So example, because it's an established tool, or because you know the groups that published it, or the programmer. So what would be your ideas why you would trust something like this, even though it doesn't look really, correct on the first view? I can see that. So yes, if it seems to be off, so why should I trust it? Yeah, I totally can see that. So it would be the situation to contact the group if you want to use it, or you would try to replicate it, I guess. So what about, yeah, I would try to verify. I'm also on that. Or maybe to look at it like, wouldn't trust it? Yes, yeah. I totally can see that. That is not, it needs to be verified, yeah, and reproduced elsewhere. I totally agree to that. And something like maybe peer-reviewed, and look also at different options to see what how to solve the situation, or maybe contact the group. And I'm totally also there. It would also be my reaction, like, if it's really off, I at least have to check something about it. So thank you a lot for all your ideas. So that is the question that refers to the session, the working group next week, but just as a warm up already here. So if we would invent something like a fair badge, let's say where virtual research environment have a timestamp where they get maybe a fair badge for, yeah, they do a really great job in interoperability, or they do a really good job in findable documentation, accessibility. Would that help to, if you see a badge for a software framework that they have a certain quality there, would that help increase your trust in this environment? Not sure, yeah. I can see that. Because that is the other thing. These badges are also, can you trust the badges? I mean, we get them in this, you know, in this loophole of maybe, you know. Yes, and I like also that, I have to say. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. And so I would like now to continue with 3 questions, and I hope I see maybe some discussions in the chat. Okay, yeah, I greater trust in the research if the data is shared. I'm totally with you, Elaine. Definitely depends, but if the data are occupying a peer-reviewed publication, my trust increases. Yes, I'm with that. I would want to know what the qualifying for the badge entails. Yeah, there should be an explanation exactly what it really entails. So that is fantastic. So Venkat, since we got additional participants, maybe you can introduce yourself for a moment again, and then I would let you, as expert in security, answer 3 questions. Venkat, would you introduce yourself for a moment again? Because we have 2 more participants.
Oh, sorry, I'm muted. Yeah. Yeah, again, my name is Venkatakrishnan, and I'm the Director of Research at DPI. I'm also a computer security and privacy researcher, and I've looked at questions around security and privacy attacks on computer systems and software vulnerability analysis, measures for improving trust and reliability of computer systems, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. So one of the questions, and anyone is welcome to put also comments in the chat, to raise their hand. So we thought that this is a nice way to kick off the discussion with Venkat as the security person. So is fairness of VREs the basis for trusting results in VREs, or does this apply for a subset of VREs? Like, you know, does it have to be fairness, or can it be also a closed environment where more like a black box for the users?
I think it's, I would go and say that fairness is sort of a broad basis for trust in all of science. It's not just VREs, though VREs do make it somewhat more interesting, the discussion of these issues, right? I do think that at the end of the day, if we were to trust the results of some science, the result should be at some level reproducible. And the more effort goes into making, you know, things reproducible, accessible, right? You know, I think we have greater trust in the science. That said, I think the VREs, they facilitate a broader set of people to come together and collaborate on science. And so as a mechanism, they are affording a broader participation. But because they are sort of broadly available, right? There are interesting questions about security, privacy, and trust that don't normally occur in a sort of a small group in-person type collaboration. And so it's worth looking at what are some of those issues, and and whether the fairness is alone capturing that as a whole, the overall trust issue is something worth thinking through, because I think that the FAIR principles are only kind of are there assuming all other things are or following some norms. But I think that since VREs they tend to improve accessibility, perhaps at the cost of accountability, or I wouldn't want to venture into any kind of real generalizations without discussing some specific scenarios where these questions become interesting. But broadly, I think there is a greater tension between making something available and accessible, and ensuring that it's accountable and trustworthy. I think this is the this has always been a problem for security. The more control a system affords, the better, more secure it is in some sense. But then that is sort of antithesis to the whole notion of making something accessible, available, and and affording greater participation. So how to build sort of measures to improve trust, both on a scientific level as well as at the level of a community? That I found this as an interesting topic for discussing, and we can get into sort of more specifics there. But maybe that's so. The short answer is yes. I think fairness principles are important for all of science, but VREs deserve a more nuanced discussion in this context, because it's not just fair, right? Or the notion accessible has to be somewhat more nuanced than what it actually has been in the past, right? So that's
yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, I fully agree, and it's really, therefore it's a big topic how to define that with VREs, and also to, as you said, to walk the line between, yes, for security, it would be the best thing to really close it down and make it secure and only give people access who really need the piece of access. But on the other hand, the notion of sharing data and all this and research is really a big topic, and open science is important. And I think very important to share all these things, but it comes with its problems, of course, with security problems. So another question would be then, here from Anne. It is several aspects that concur to trust, not just. So Anne, would you like to maybe say something about that?
Oh yeah, I think trust has many different sort of components to it, right? It's the trust in the methods, the trust in the workflow, right? So that's one. But also trust in the community at a more social level. Is this a group of folks that I would like to engage with, I would like to associate with, that I would like to put my name against? And it's a more complex problem. It's not just one-dimensional. First of all, and even in the poll that we ran just before this, right? There were, it's not that a single notion or a single definition will satisfy all, right? I think trust has to ultimately boil down to user affinity and psychology, and and each of us are sort of products of different experiences, when it comes to online trust. So I think this has to sort of necessarily involve a broad community-based, approach on understanding and building, and it's not just the methods for the workflows or the tools or the publishing of the data, but the broader community measures that are adopted to ensure, for instance, the badging is one, right? If a community has a uniform stance against, badging for, fairness, adherence to, fairness principles, I mean, I would say that goes towards improving the overall trust, right? So, and it's not a one-dimensional thing. Just by doing that, one cannot get the trust of everybody. So it broadly is, trust is a topic we can talk about for several hours. I think it's a very complex phenomenon that is studied at a variety of levels. At a technological level, how do we ensure, trust? At the level of, individual users, and their psychologies and their affinities towards, certain things, how do we ensure that? At the level of community or, societies, how do we, engender, greater trust in, a particular system or a particular set of methods? Then there is questions of economics and also the enterprise. How do you trust there boils down to sort of broader incentives that are there for the various actors, and that, so the incentives have to be aligned for trust to happen. So all these, so as you can see, trust is a very complex subject,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't boil down to one or two things that we can put a checklist on. Right?
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. It gets very complex from the different perspectives, as you said, and especially on a personal level for one user. Yeah, that's psychology. It's not even, that there is a kind of, but it's also still part of it in virtual research environments. Why we look at trust is because we want people to feel like that they can share their data and that they can trust results, because, or maybe be confident in the results is another topic about this, because that is important also to continue with research and not make people to reinvent the wheel, but to reuse solutions and make these also really communities. Yes. So like,
okay. Can I ask a question? I am interested from your perspective, as you said, there are multiple dimensions in there for trust. For something like the VREs, where we're trying to develop tools and capabilities for researchers to do that, what if as a builder of these things, what are some of the ways you might think are key concerns that you might want to pay attention to be able to build those different layers of trust that you talked about?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and this requires some broader, thinking about sort of designs of VREs themselves, right? What is, and then sometimes, as I alluded earlier, it might just also be some broader question of to what extent do we want to go in order to ensure that many competing concerns are, find a balance, right? Sometimes usability and trust go together, but usability and security, might not, be, going hand in hand, right? So I think there is some design element or some aspect of trade-offs and finding a balance that is required, and that's a topic of a larger discussion. But I think at a purely technological level, I think there are things that can be done that can ensure greater trust. So for instance, if the VREs provide a first-class support for reproducibility, snapshotting, all this, right? So for instance, if there is a scientific experiment, what are sort of the broader qualities of the data that someone can check and two, how is the workflow designed, and does it meet sort of the norms and standards of a community, and three, does it provide the automation, the snapshotting for someone to ensure full reproducibility of the results. So if these kind of things can be provided as first-class primitives in the VRE, by first-class primitives, I mean, like, if I want to rerun this experiment or this simulation, is there support inside the VRE for me to do this as somebody who's completely outside the system, completely outside the, if there is first-class support, and the question is, how do we design such, what should the design look like, and how should we make sure that these the various user needs in ensuring this kind of a broader reproducibility is there, right? So for instance, if I can ensure that the results that of a certain experiment, and this is somewhat easier for VREs compared to a conventional lab-based setup, right? Because I think that with sort of many other things, tools and innovations that have happened on the platform independent side, snapshotting something and packaging something so that they are all reproducible on one click, right? The results. I think that should be very, and that can improve trust at a very, at an individual level. But how do we design systems, VRE, so that if somebody wants to do it, everything else is sort of automated around providing that first-class assurance, right? That would be a very good question to work in to the design of VREs. If experiments can be replicated with technological support, I'm just thinking in my mind, if there is a particular project that's available, can I rerun the project with the same set of data and observe, more or less the similar results without much effort? Are VREs providing first-class support for such things, right? So that, yeah, and it can also improve science, right? But once those kind of things are there, and if somebody else has an idea to innovate on top of that, it just becomes a very natural way to sort of even build on the science that is there. So, and then, there is greater participation, greater trust, there is a greater sense of ownership. All this improves trust. So, I think at some technological level, if we think through what is the first-class support, then I think it can improve trust at a variety of levels. But this is more of a design question and technology building question. But technology is just one aspect of things, right? I think what other things that the VRE does to effectively build communities. How do we? So, for instance, many conferences have also started doing this. That there are artifacts for papers that are being submitted, and there is an artifact selection committee that looks at these artifacts and provides some kind of a badge, right? Now, can those artifacts be submitted inside a VRE, and the VRE provides some kind of first-class support to check the validity of the experiments? If that is there, then the job of the artifact evaluation committee becomes easier. They co-opt into a VRE, right? Now, I think so these are all ways by which some community level engagement, and this is like getting conferences involved to actually. Because these are like fairly substantive committees, and if they get involved in how informing the design of these systems, I think that can broadly improve trust, and there will be more ideas that flow in and whatnot, right?
Great, thank you very much. So Lane has also a question or a comment.
Yeah, just a comment, and I'm going to bring up a specific example, and I promise it'll circle back to all of VREs, I think. Specifically, there's this concept in Earth observation data and science, satellite data, analysis ready data, because there is a huge pre-processing requirement, like not unique to satellite data, of course, but there's like a relatively common workflow to go from point A to point B to get the data ready for analysis, hence the clever term ARD. And ARD is universally praised in the literature. It's the idea that, oh, this is the next step in Earth observation research. This is how we get researchers involved. This is how we bridge the gap between these massive archives that are just sitting there unused. The providers pre-process the data and the researchers use it. That's great. But I think this goes back to what you were saying earlier, Sandra, about if you build it and you promote it and they trust you, then they will come. Because I was speaking with some researchers, and this is only a couple of researchers, this is just anecdotal, but they said that they wouldn't trust ARD right away. They were very, very hesitant. They talked about how, as researchers, they need to stake like their credibility on their work. And so even if it's a lot more effort on their part, unless they know exactly what is going into their model, they don't want to use it. They would rather do the same thing that all of the other researchers are also doing. Everyone is just doing these like same steps in parallel because there is a fundamental lack of trust. And I think that beyond FAIR, the importance of documentation and transparency above all else is something that will really help increase researcher trust in these products. And so not just geospatial data, but like all of these tools and all of VREs, I think that's an important lesson.
Yes, thanks a lot. I fully agree, and we got also some comments here from Anne. So if people share regularly data and these data are reused by others, it's also a positive sign. People who are not confident in the quality of their data do not tend to share them. Yeah, I think Venkat will agree to that. And so she has also a question. Do you think that the reasons for trust and willingness to reuse are variable according to domains, disciplines, or are rather uniform across disciplines? What is your experience there, Venkat?
Oh, I think it varies across disciplines, especially in the area of health. You know, there are multiple complexities involved. There is regulation, there is intellectual property. So health data is probably the most scarce, and you know, it's a pity because it is one thing if it's one thing that can greatly improve the society and the world at large. You know, the availability of that and greater collaboration, but it's sort of muddled with all these complexities for the right reasons, right? So I think, you know, but on the other hand, more like communities like GIS, they are more freely, you know, they are more open and sharing of data, the sharing of data. Communities like transportation, although everywhere, I think there is some slight tension between data rights, property, intellectual property rights, and this, right? But I think that broadly, it's I would say it is discipline specific. You know, some communities are very vehemently more open, right? You know, and demand these things. I think the security privacy community that I am aware of, you know, it walks that fine balance. You know, on the one hand, you know, there is a greater you know, push for making, you know, artifacts available, data available for reproduction, right? But on the other hand, there is some acknowledgement that not all the time data may become available for very practical reasons that I just mentioned. So I think, you know, somewhere I would not put the security community in like among the most open in terms of data sharing and other things. But there are other communities, especially in the social sciences, you know, I think there is a greater notion of sharing, right? You know, so yeah, it's community dependent, the discipline dependent. Yeah.
Absolutely. And in the chat, there was also a nice discussion between Anne and Solane. And one question, a really interesting question also from Petra. Are there guidelines being developed on how to design a VRE that improves trust and adoption? I don't know at the moment. I don't know, Venkat, what you know about a community that develops maybe such guidelines at the moment?
Oh, I'm not aware of the
Me
aware of
neither.
any guidelines for VREs, but I think there is plenty of literature available on improving trust in things. So, for instance, as newer technologies emerge, the question of trust, like robots in, let's just say assisted living settings. How do we get elderly people to actually trust robots? And so this is a question that has been looked at very extensively. So whenever there is a new piece of technology, the question of trust and adoption always are there. So those might serve as sort of guidelines for starting, or good starting points for thinking about how mechanisms can be built in VREs that improve trust and adoption. I think, there is a lot of literature out there, much more than, because it is kind of the sum of all the literature of new, about trust in new technologies. And there have been different, now there is a, crypto, trust in crypto, right? That's another thing, robotics and AI. But each comes with its own set of, interesting complexities. For AI, things are like a black box. So trust is even more of a problem, right? For crypto, it is just, it's a new notion that people have to grapple with, right? So there is some lack of affinity there. So again, I think, if that kind of thing is understood, the basic tenets there on designing trust in new technologies, I think those are things that VREs can adopt. There is a lot of literature from which you have to pull some meta literature, right? That's the.
Great, thanks. Kiran,
Can I also add to that one, Petra's question? So I think one of the things I'm observing here is that the VREs community is on a journey that the last sort of number of years has been about building these VREs, understanding how to build them, what works, what doesn't work for that. And we've sort of now at a point where that's fairly well known. If you're going to build a VRE, you know how to go about doing it. Everybody understands it. And now we're starting to move into these other areas at the higher order ones about what does it mean to be trust? How do we reuse components between VREs and these sort of things? So I think this conversation about trust is something that's emerging in this space and becoming more prominent. So I kind of expect to see some of these emerge over the next number of years and then through these kind of discussions that we're having.
Absolutely. And the other question I would have also for you, Venkat, but also for the whole group. So, and you already brought up like that there is now the cryptocurrency and AI also very prominent with all, all the machine learning methods which are coming up. So if we look at that field, we know that there is more black box now. So how can we increase trust in these black boxes maybe? And the other question would be, so, and we need then other skills. So we need, which knowledge acquisition and transfer we don't need anymore because we have these, machine learning AI methods. But what do we need to learn then instead?
Well, that's a great question. I think just specifically on the machine learning side of things, right? There are at least 2 or 3 different levels to improve trustworthiness, right? In fact, there is an entire team that is working on trustworthy aspects of machine learning at DPI. So one is, just sort of at a technological level, the methods themselves, use of explainable, interpretable AI, so that what you see is not just a bunch of inputs provided and an output, a prediction signal, but in some sense the internals of the AI being exposed on why it made the decision that it did, and making it somewhat more transparent, right? There have been a number of methods, in particular, there are neurosymbolic methods that are available. So the symbolic methods are more like conventional logic, which is transparent, right? And the neural methods are the neural network, deep learning methods that are there in vogue. And so there is a whole field of neurosymbolic learning that is emerging, that is gaining a lot of attention, right? So at a technological level, I think there is certainly there is progress being made. But on a sort of a more incorporation level, that is, so the AI is not an isolated system, but it's often part of a larger workflow that provides a service, whether it is pricing for Uber or whatever, right? Any of these things that use AI and provide some predictive models. Now the question is, what is the FAIR principles mean for the larger system that incorporates AI, right? And there, I think again we have some broader ideas and solutions, but they have not found reasonable ways of incorporation. So for instance, there are methods and policies that actually check for adherence to whether the machine learning system doesn't go rogue or doesn't provide a prediction that is wild, right? Which can happen. That's what happened to the self-driving car when it hit that woman in Arizona, right? So it because that was a cloudy day, and the vision methods went rogue, right? So basically, we need some broader controls and policies in the system that incorporates AI. And this is something that the security community has looked at for a very long time, how to monitor systems for safety and how to incorporate safety policies and other things. So that could be there for privacy and transparency as well, right? So I think the science of how to integrate a black box system into a larger system and still provide assurances, that is also a science that is growing, right? And we need more work there. And three, I think, of course, about policies, right? About greater policies that afford, greater transparency and auditability of these systems. Policies at the level of, so if there is an AI system being used in a city, the city has to decide what sort of broader policies need to be in place in case, so that to ensure that the system that incorporates AI is still adhering to basic human values, right? And so those are all, some aspects of things that we should worry about. What has happened is, with all these tremendous technological advances, the basics are there for ensuring that, for ensuring that these principles hold. So, for instance, VREs provide, greater access, collaboration, automation, snapshotting, scripting, so all these. So I think at some level, once they all become commoditized, people don't need to and become first-class services. People don't need to worry about them. People need to think about designs. People need to think about policies, right? How do VREs provide greater support for flexible designs of different communities? How do they provide support for policies, that the community of users want to adopt, right? So in some sense, the low-level skills of building and and implementing that has already, we have achieved that maturity in that science and technology development, but it's more about aspects of design, aspects of policy specification, enforcement. So how things that hold the community together, right? What are aspects that will promote that in a VRE, and how to provide first-class support for that. That the knowledge needs to be developed, and it needs to be sort of transferred across, right? I think that the basic technological building blocks are there. I don't think that kind of knowledge, these days with users being quite savvy, we do not need more knowledge transfer work there, but we need knowledge transfer in terms of how people use these primitives, these building blocks, and try to get to the higher level questions that are frankly the best part about these online research environments, right?
So Anne had a comment about that, because she said, so I'm not so into computer science, so I'm kind of obliged to trust data and software without mastering. So there should be then a search for another reason to trust data and be confident in them, if So what you presented, Venkat, was, I think, good for developers, but I see Anne's point, and would you like to say more?
Yeah, that was a reaction to the fact that the discussion on trust was getting important in this session. And I was explaining that the direction of the discussion is probably different if you have people very, better like that, yes, very competent in technically speaking in the tools, or if you have, and that's not my case. So if I cannot master the tool, understand all the processes and how it works, then I'm searching for other reasons to trust what is available. And that is why I say that I trust people who are usually putting their data, and these data are used by others. So there are reasons to trust them without understanding completely the systems that some other people can better understand. And so this is part of their willingness to use and their trust in the data. So that was just this comment.
No, of course, because big portion of the VRE community are users and not the developers.
Yeah.
So that is also, science gateways are made for the users. They don't have their, let's say, own fulfilling purpose. It's always made to make the life easier for researchers. That is their. So yeah, Kiran, you want to say something?
I wanted to actually ask Anne a bit more about what she's saying, because I think that's quite interesting. So Anne, what kind of things would you be looking for, and what would make it easy for you to find those things that enable you to trust in a system that you actually don't understand what's happening there from that technical sense?
Probably, well, this is not very rational, but if there is a lot of explanation, transparency about what is to explain the system, even if I don't understand it myself, I know that other people are looking if all this is open and available. So if these very technical aspects are available for other people, including, of course, they are made for them, those who really understand technically, that could make me trusting. Because I say, if it was not transparently of quality, I would say, people who are able to discuss about the technical process would argue and would say it. So even if I don't understand completely some technical aspect, the fact that there is a very good documentation on that I am not going to read myself, but that I know people who understand it are reading, and they say, okay, that's good. That could play for me as a reason for using the data and the trust.
Thanks. I know this is also being things, how it's built and how it's being, how the system works is open, and you see other people using it, then there's got to build that, because others who do understand it more are more like, I think, will give that trust to you. Yeah, thank you. That's really insightful. Petra, you.
I just wanted to add one more use case to what Anne was saying, and that's from the biomedical field, from the genomics, where I think it's often a similar case where they are now built quite a robust workflows using bioinformatic tools. And you can imagine that you can have a PI who is very good in understanding the concepts and ideas, and has a broad knowledge of the literature, but is not very good in bioinformatic technical aspect of the analysis. So then, actually, in that case, you would have to either understand the details of the pipeline and the statistical analysis that is part of that analysis, Otherwise, you would have to think that you have to trust who is doing the analysis, that the results are correct. It's not like, you run the gel and you see whether there is a bend or not. It's on a completely different level. And then in that case, you are really, to some extent, trusting the person who is doing the analysis rather than being able to verify every step yourself, even with good documentation. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I think from my understanding of that, it's that in the bioinformatics space, that there is a whole trusted community that has evolved around those workflows that the others do trust, isn't it? And that community.
So Venkat, you have also, because I know you wanted to answer Anne's question also.
Oh, and I didn't mean to sort of ignore the users, right? I think the users are central to the question of trust. My comments were more to designers and developers, because I think a well-designed system at the end is the one that can provide the trust, right? And so trying to provide first-class support for improving trust in a system, I was trying to give both technological and and other means of accomplishing that. Of course, all of that has to take into account how users feel about the system and feel about the presence of those types of support support in the system, right? So I didn't. My comments were more towards empowering the users with the kinds of things that can be made possible with first-class support in VREs. How exactly those can be communicated to users and build their trust, that's a different topic, and maybe we need a human-computer interaction expert also, who I'm not one. I have not looked at the HCI side of things in security, but there are many people that have looked at these questions, done user studies and studies with other human subjects. So I think the experience from those studies can be brought to bear on these design discussions as well.
Thank you very much, Venkat. I know there's a mini crisis going on, so thank you very much for your expert opinion. If you still can stay a little bit for the last 20 minutes, that would be great. If not, I understand. If we understand that you have to go now. So.
Oh, sure. I'd love to stay. I enjoyed this discussion, and I'd like to. I'd also like to stay engaged in this topic, and see how I can contribute. And so I think, thank you for again inviting me, Sandra, and it's a pleasure to meet all of you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Petra, do you still have your hand up, or a new topic? Oh, okay. Yeah, I agree that the biomedical example is one of, so let's say I know from my own experience, coming from computer science and getting into bioinformatics, and that my first impression was also, oh, okay, I think I have to trust the molecular simulations here because I cannot, program and implement that all myself again. So I'm totally on that level also with you. It's when, sequence data comes back from sequencing facilities, you have to trust them. There is no way around that. So I'm totally there with you. So what we would like to do is still to discuss additional questions with the whole group. So for example, what are measures to improve trust in computational methods used in VRE? So one thing is the environment. So you log into it, or, you can use something. But as we started already to talk about and also discuss this computational method, and I like really the idea that we need maybe something like a catalog of what computational methods should fulfill. So maybe we can brainstorm here about what what would make you trust the computational method more, even though you cannot, trust, or all the details, as Petra and Anne brought it up. So for example, I can start, for me it would be if it's coming from a group where I know that there were already trustworthy results. They have peer-reviewed publication. They have a reputation in the field. I would make it a personal topic in that regard, a kind of, dependent on the researchers, which might be also not the best way, but what would be other ways you would see how to trust something you cannot, analyze yourself.
Mm.
How do you decide that? And you did unmute you, but I don't.
Mm. Oh, yeah, no.
Okay.
Sorry, I was thinking, but not wanted to talk.
Oh, okay.
Right
No, sorry. I did the unmute button and then I thought maybe we didn't hear you or something. No, but yeah, it's food for thought. It's a kind of this. I'm also not sure besides peer review process, because I'm not always convinced. I think a peer review process is a good thing. Don't get me wrong, but it's so dependent. There are biases. There's a really interesting research that came out 2-3 years ago, also about looking at papers and proposals in general. So there's this, if you have a peer review process, so if something is really outstanding good, most of the reviewers agree. If something is outstanding bad, also most of the reviewers agree. But in the middle, there is all the possibilities. Because, yeah, we are human beings. We bring different bias and knowledge about topics and all these things. So while I think, as I said, peer review process helps a lot, it's also not bulletproof. So I think maybe I really like the suggestion of that there could be something like a catalog or measures how to increase trust in computational methods.
Mm.
So any ideas to think about?
Just going back to peer reviewers increasing trust, just something I'm thinking about. Is it fair to expect the peer reviewers of a paper to be experts in computational methods and the workflows that the researcher is using, because they're already, experts in the subject matter. And so finding that very specific expertise might be very difficult, not necessarily feasible all the time.
I totally with you there. That is, we all have different expertise, and especially in the science gateway field, it is on the one hand side, you have the science in the science gateway, and then we have the computational methods. And it's hard to find people who know about both. So what I often try with the Gateways Conference, or also with IWSG, or when it comes to science gateways, where there are use cases and computational methods, if it's both in a paper, to get someone who has a lot of experience in the field already. If it's and has dealt with both sides. Otherwise, I think, it's not always fair. And therefore, you get often also peer reviews where people say, I'm not totally sure about all the aspects. Because, as you said, it's hard. If a paper is really about both the science and the computational method, it's hard to find reviewers who are the same expert in both. That is, that is part of the problems why reviews look so different. Dawn, you have your hand up.
Yes, so just was wondering about potential opportunity for some different approaches to a peer review process that maybe broaden and make more flexible the approach that we're used to with a very sort of linear and narrow in scope review process of getting a paper published. Wondering if the environments might support a more like a hybrid type of peer, like on the one hand, you have the very open community where everyone's looking at the data and everyone's evaluating it. And then you have a very formal peer review process on the other end. And just the nature of the environment sort of opens up the review of data to more people. So maybe some of the biases that you were mentioning could sort of smooth themselves out just by virtue of having results and data open to more people, more eyes on it. And maybe on the technology side, there are some tools that could help facilitate feedback from the community on the quality of the data or the computations or the results. So without it being a full formal peer review process, it would be like a peer review light process.
Yeah, I like that. I think to revisit this very strict model, as you said, of peer review in open science with more eyes, I would love that, to be honest, because it's just like, I've seen the difference when you have, for example, 2 reviewers or 5 reviewers for a paper. You can see different tendencies there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only sometimes concerned that, and with open science, I think it happens for each of us, our time gets, tighter and tighter to review things.
Mm-hmm.
With more publications, more data, more things, artifacts shared openly. I hope that there's still the time to do it also, in a way how this artifact deserves to be reviewed. Because if I have to do every day like 2 reviews, instead of having to do every 2 weeks 2 reviews, I hope the review is not suffering on quality. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. So, but I like the idea because I think this model of peer review, how it is at the moment, is too strict and not fitting well to data and software. I think we need new ways. So yeah, maybe, we need to try. We need to try, and maybe there is a way to say we split it differently. I mean, a colleague of mine, for example, was reviewer on the reproducibility part of the supercomputing conference this year, and she said it was a lot of work to really try to reproduce for each paper what happens there, who offered the artifact.
Right.
That is the goal, to make it reproducible. So yeah, and I would love to try different models. Yes, Petra or Petra, how do you?
Yeah, Petra. I just wanted to only add one comment to that. I think one of the ways perhaps forward would be to encourage more post-publication reviews. I think some journals are already accepting that that there is a light review, then the article goes out, and then the community essentially reviews, because within the community you can always find experts in that specific domain. So those then can have probably the expertise and time to provide a more detailed review of the data and to perhaps even reproduce them and then provide their comments to that. So, and then that would, if that all would be made public, also the community reviews, then it would gain trust or not in that specific work that has been published. So it wouldn't lie, or the weight wouldn't lie only on the 2-3 peer reviewers, before it's published, but only after the publication.
I like that. Yeah. I have seen it only in one journal yet, but this would be really, I think, a good way to go. Yeah, I like that because it gives, it takes also some pressure off that it all has to, be found by the 2-3 reviewers before publication.
I think that's also something that that has to be considered by data repositories, because the data stewards can obviously have only certain level of understanding of the data they are publishing. So there are some quality checks you can always do, and those are obviously done. But then at some point you will have to publish the data and then put it out there to the community to decide whether that data set is going to be used or not. Based on the quality of the data, that cannot always be to the latest detail, nitty-gritty detail, be tested by the curator who is publishing the data set. So that is probably similar to the peer review articles or data papers, for example.
Yeah. I think that would be, that is a great suggestion, because relying on single persons is just on the expertise. It's just hard. So yes. So you would like to say also, with the programmers, your comment?
Oh yeah. And just posted something. I'm just saying, when you post something publicly, very often you get a swarm of people that are like, actually, you did this wrong. This is more efficient. And so it's a very vocal community. And so opening that process a little bit to the public might be beneficial in like limited circumstances. I also think it's interesting because earlier we were talking about how widespread use of a specific tool increases trust. And so there's like this, not necessarily disconnect. I just think the juxtaposition is interesting, because like, how do we get our experts to review these artifacts? And then once they're out in the open and everyone's like using them, that's when trust begins to develop.
Yeah, this open source software, yes, it's a very vocal community, that is true. And it's a good community. I remember when a student was like, Sandra, I just published it and I got this, directly 3 responses who found a bug in my program. And he was sad about it. I said, no, you should be thrilled. First of all, you should get away that software is bug-free. No software is bug-free if it's not Hello World. And then having a reaction and someone takes the time to tell him what the bug is and once it's solved, that is fantastic. That is the best reaction you can have on your software. So yes. So, and the open community reviews, also publication,
Yeah, I just want to say that when you get comments, and of course in research there is competition, so it's important to make clear if you have links of interest, what is your relation to the work that has been published and you are commenting upon, because we are not free of having negative comments from people who would just want to make untrusty the data of their competitors and things like that. That's the bad side of things, but it just exists. So by making the links transparent, you prevent that and make it open. You prevent, in a way, this kind of things.
Yeah, and I'm also a fan of them. The reviewers also have to give their names. It cannot be that they are,
Yes,
so,
I know.
Because
so
totally
it should be the same. It should be the same also in post-publication. Comments. Not that you cannot comment, but at least you say where you sit in
Yeah.
your comments.
Yeah. I've seen Petra, you had also a reaction that,
No, I just wanted to second that obviously the reviewers have to provide their name and full affiliation so that everyone can make a picture of the, of the landscape and of the comments once the publication is out. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. For example, a colleague of mine that's bring a publication, it's called molecular simulation. He sent it to a journal in molecular dynamics. And one of the reviewers sent back that he doesn't believe in that molecular dynamics gives reasonable results, so he's not accepting this paper. So it was a kind of, really? So these are the moments where you think, yeah, but there's a community who's working with us and has reasonable results. So, rejecting a paper just like, oh, I don't believe in that is not the right way to do things. So these are the ones, of course, we want to filter out, make it clear if they add this publicly to, for example, a paper or a data set, then it's a kind of probably that the community judges in that moment, we disregard this review. I hope so, at least, that there will be this, that if there's one reviewer who has, let's say, a certain bias, that is filtered out. Yeah, absolutely. So this was a great discussion. I hope you all also enjoyed that. We are almost at the end of the session. So yeah, thanks to all of you. Thanks, Anne. And so we will have next week the fair for VRE sessions also at 2 times, so that it's for everyone also a good time zone, and it's a working group. So if you are interested, it will go on for 18 months. And we are defining timeline and what the exact goals are together with the community next week. We have some suggestions, but yeah, so that is the goal. And yes, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the discussions and hope to see you in other sessions. Thanks, bye.